Some men test rules. Some men test luck. But a certain kind of fool thinks respect is optional, especially when the target is old and quiet and sitting alone at a corner booth. The diner was humming with forks and low music when the door swung open, and a man with too much leather and not enough decency shouldered his way in. He wanted the whole room to see him, and they did, because what he did next wasn't just cruel, it was loud. He slapped a 96-year-old army sergeant hard enough to spin his coffee. The old man's medals clinked against his blazer. The room froze. The gangster grinned like he'd done something brave. What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the man he'd just humiliated wasn't alone. Jasonstatham had just walked in behind him. Not as the action hero, not as the celebrity. As a son. If you've got a few minutes, I'll tell you exactly how a bully tried to write his legend, and how Jasonstatham rewrote it with one quiet sentence, 2 open hands, and a room full of witnesses who suddenly remembered what dignity looks like. The smell in that place was the kind you only get in diners that have survived 3 owners and 5 presidents. Burnt coffee, hot butter, and a stubborn streak of bleach that never quite wins. Vinyl seats patched with duct tape. A pie carousel doing slow circles like a hypnotist's watch. The afternoon rush had thinned to the regulars, nurses off shift, a trucker reading a paper, the line cook who'd been there long enough to call everyone kid, even if they were pushing 60. At the corner table sat Arthur Statham, 96, wearing a suit that fit his bones and a tie his late wife used to pick for him when he had somewhere important to be. He always wore it when he visited the diner. Important didn't mean fancy. Important meant people. He had his routine. He'd order the same thing, oatmeal, strong tea, half a grapefruit. Then he'd slide his knuckles over the row of small bronze medallions he kept pinned to the inside of his blazer, as if making sure the past hadn't slipped off while he wasn't looking. Every so often, a server would prod him to tell a story, and he'd oblige with a grin that still had a dimple when the light hit right. He'd talk about landing strips with no lights, about letters that took months to arrive, about how fear never learned to read a calendar. He didn't brag, he remembered. The door banged open. 3 men piled in, one large and loud at the front, 2 eager satellites orbiting him. Their jackets screamed money, their eyes screamed debt. The leader had the kind of haircut that cost you $100 and respect all at once. He walked like the world was a hallway he'd been asked to own. They didn't wait for a host. They cut across the room toward Arthur's booth, not because there weren't other seats, but because bullies don't sit, they conquer space. Arthur kept eating, as if gravity was a courtesy he'd learned to uphold. "Look at this," the leader said, loud, theatrical, like he was breaking news. "Old man's got medals. Hey, Grandpa, you win those playing dress-up." The satellites laugh-barked on cue. One of them snatched a medal between 2 fingers and let it ping back against the blazer. Arthur's hand lifted an inch as if to intercept, then fell, slow, like a leaf. His eyes stayed calm in a way that made the leader feel smaller, which is probably why the leader did what he did next. He raised his hand and slapped the side of Arthur's head. Not a punch. Worse, a slap says, "You don't matter enough to hit." The diner's room tone changed. Even the pie carousel sounded offended. Servers froze with plates midair. Someone's phone lit up, the kind of spectator courage that can't be bothered to help but loves to replay. Arthur blinked. His tea trembled. He didn't reach for his cheek. He reached for the saucer, steadying it as if the tea deserved more care than the man did. "Young man," he said, voice carried by decades, "have some dignity." The leader laughed like a man who couldn't afford silence. "You gonna make me?" That was when the entrance door opened again. The bell above it tried to ring casual, but even the bell knew something had shifted. Jasonstatham stepped in wearing a black jacket, black t-shirt, jeans. He didn't stride, he arrived. No announcement, no entourage, just that expression he has when a problem is already a memory, you just haven't realized it yet. He took in the room in one sweep, the leader's stance, the satellite's twitchy hands, his father's saucer shaking under a cup that had seen worse. Jason's face didn't change, he just moved, not fast, not slow, direct. As he walked, the satellite's bravado shrank like paper in rain. "Dad," he said, and the word landed like a gavel. Arthur looked up and the whole room saw the dimple again. "Jason," he said, mild as weather, These boys are lost. The leader's brain did busy work, actor, movies, memes, but none of it helped with the math of the moment. He smirked anyway. Well, Hollywood, you gonna sign an autograph or wipe the tea off Grandpa's chin? Jason looked at him as if someone had knocked on his skull and nobody answered. Then he pulled a paper napkin, dabbed the tea off Arthur's sleeve, and set the cup back in its halo of porcelain. Finish your tea, he told his father. I'll be a minute. He turned to the leader with the courtesy of a man opening a door. Outside, Jason said. The leader scoffed. You think I'm going outside because you gave me stage direction? Jason's eyes dipped to the leader's raised hand, the hand that had slapped. When he looked up again, the air got colder. You slapped a 96-year-old man who fought so people like you could be safe enough to grow this stupid, he said softly. Outside. A thing happens in rooms when someone certain speaks. The room decides it already agrees. The leader felt it and panicked, which for men like him feels like volume. I ain't going anywhere, he barked, and reached down and flipped Arthur's cup on its side, sending tea across the table and onto the old man's lap. That did it, not because of the liquid, because of the choice. Jason's hand moved before anyone knew it had started. He slid the saucer out of the splash's path, caught the cup, set it upright, and with the same motion took the leader's wrist like it had been handed to him for safekeeping. He didn't squeeze. He simply held. Things happen to bones when certainty holds them. The leader's face whitened like a bad decision. Outside, Jason repeated, and the leader nodded because it was easier than learning to crawl. They stepped into the parking lot, where the sky had gone the color of a bruise that was thinking about it. A breeze moved the smell of coffee and gasoline around like a bartender tasting cocktails. A couple of regulars followed to the windows, noses pressed like schoolkids. The satellites tried to arrange themselves into bravery. Jason didn't even look at them. He pointed with his chin to the strip of asphalt between two parking spaces. There, he said to the leader. You stand there. You gonna hit me? The leader sneered, voice hunting for solid ground. Jason shook his head. No, you're not worth the bruise on my knuckles. You're going to apologize to my father. Then you're going to sit with him and listen to a story he chooses. Then you're going to pay for every meal in that diner today and for his meals for the next year. And if you don't, I'll explain to your boss why the CCTV footage shows you assaulting a decorated veteran and then refusing to make it right when presented the chance. I assume your boss has a mother. The leader blinked, brain dragging behind the conversation like a luggage wheel stuck on gum. You can't make me. Jason stepped close enough for the leader to smell the mint on his breath. I'm trying not to, he said softly. I'm giving you a chance to make yourself. One of the satellites, eager to save face, decided this would be a good moment to be stupid. He lunged. Jason pivoted and the man met the reality of physics. Jason let him charge past, tapped an elbow that belonged to yesterday, and the satellite found the hood of a sedan with his ribs. Jason didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the leader. You're not a fighter, Jason said. You're loud is cheap. The leader flicked his gaze to the windows, faces watching like a jury, and found his courage in the place cowards always keep it, rage. He swung. Jason didn't block so much as edit the air. The punch went somewhere it hadn't intended to, and the leader's balance followed it into the land of regret. Jason caught him by the jacket, pivoted, and placed him against the wall, not slammed, not tossed. Placed. It was somehow worse. Enough, Jason said, and the word reached the parts of the leader's spine that understood history. Go inside. The leader swallowed. Pride made one last bid. And if I do? Jason pointed with his eyes to a small stack of old newspapers by the door, the kind that sit waiting to be recycled. I'll fold you into that and carry you like last week's news. Silence did what fists couldn't. The leader's shoulders slumped. Fine, he muttered. Not fine, Jason said. Say the words you owe him. They went back in. The bell tried to be casual again and failed. The diner was quiet in the way churches are when someone's about to say something important. Arthur hadn't moved. He dabbed his lap with a napkin and set his metals straight, and his tea, somehow, was upright and steaming again because the server named Kayla had refilled it with hands that shook. The leader stopped at the table. He couldn't look Arthur in the eye. That was all right. Arthur had seen enough eyes to know when a man was out of his own. I'm sorry, the leader said, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. I shouldn't have, he gestured vaguely at the air as if a pronoun could hold shame. Slapped a stranger who did nothing to you, Arthur supplied kindly, which made it worse. Right, the leader said, that. Arthur regarded him not unkindly. I accept your apology, on one condition. The leader tensed, suspicious of kindness. What? Arthur tapped the medals at his chest. Ask me what they mean. A pause, the leader frowned, confused. What do they mean? Arthur rested his hands on the table like he was about to teach a class that had just gotten very lucky. They mean I was 19 once and scared. They mean I watched boys learn to be men and men learn to be boys when the shells stopped. They mean I saw a nurse stitch up a lad's face by lantern because daylight was busy. They mean the world is bigger than your noise. Sit down. The leader looked at Jason, then at the booth, then at his own reflection in the window, smaller than he'd expected. He sat. Jason slid into the other side next to his father. Kayla brought cups, 3 coffees, black, and a plate of pie that Arthur didn't ask for but always got. And then they listened. Arthur's voice didn't boom. It ambled like a walk you take when you don't have somewhere to be except here. He told them about a train platform where mothers waved and didn't cry until the wheels had turned twice. About a letter he kept in his boot, because if the enemy gets your heart, it's better if they only read a little bit. About a friend who traded his jacket for a blanket with a man who had none, and then forgot to mention it in any report because sometimes mercy isn't paperwork. Kayla leaned against the counter, arms wrapped around herself, not because she was cold but because some stories make your ribs want to hold each other. The trucker folded his paper quiet. The line cook covered a plate with foil without being asked and pushed it to the edge of the pass for nobody in particular. The leader listened. At first his face tried to hold its shape, but like ice on a warm day it surrendered to gravity. When Arthur finished, the leader cleared his throat. My old man used to talk, he said, voice smaller. I didn't listen much. Arthur nodded. Start now. The leader turned to Kayla. Put everyone's tab on me, he said, and whatever he eats for the next year. He gestured to Arthur. If he'll let me. Arthur smiled that dimple smile again. I'll let you, but you'll sit with me once a week and ask about the parts of the story I forgot. The leader blinked hard and nodded. The satellites sat far away, shame like a coat that didn't fit. Jason hadn't spoken in a while. He didn't need to, but he did one last thing. He reached across, took the leader's raised hand, the same hand, and turned it palm up. A red print, faint but there, crossed the skin where it had met Arthur's cheek. Every mark we make, Jason said, almost to himself, has a cost. Try to make better ones. The leader nodded again, eyes glassy with the kind of clarity men don't often get for free. Jason slid out of the booth and stood. He squeezed Kayla's shoulder, paid for the pie anyway because stubbornness runs in families, and turned to his father. You good? Arthur lifted his tea like a salute. Tea's hot, stories told. I'm 96 and I'm with my lad, I'm good. They stepped out into the afternoon. The bell above the door, relieved, managed a normal ring. On the sidewalk, Jason moved a half step behind his father, the way you do when the person next to you has earned the right to go first. Jason, Arthur said after a few steps, you didn't have to come. Jason looked at the sky, then at the old man whose hands had once folded letters in boots. Yeah, he said, I did. They walked on, 2 figures in a town that would tell the story for years, not because a movie star had been in a diner, but because a room full of people had remembered for 10 minutes how to be decent. Inside, the leader sat very still, staring at his coffee like it had become a mirror. He slid his untouched pie to the edge of the table and nodded at Kayla to take it to the couple in the booth by the window. When she did, the woman looked confused, the man pleased, and the afternoon moved 1 notch closer to right. That's how it went, not with sirens or headlines, with a bell, a napkin, a choice, and a lesson that didn't need chalk. A gangster learned the difference between loud and strong. A son reminded a room what respect looks like standing up. And a 96-year-old sergeant finished his tea because some rituals deserve to survive us. You can dress cruelty in leather and call it power. You can stack noise on noise and call it reputation. But dignity? That's quieter. It sits at a corner booth, pins its medals inside its coat, and drinks tea until someone tries to take something it's already paid for. Then dignity stands. And when it does, decent men stand with it. That day, one of them happened to be named Jasonstatham. The other had been standing that way his whole life.